All right. Well, as folks trickle in, that's completely fine. We'll just kind of get started with our introduction, and super pumped for you guys to be here. And thanks to the PCBH SIG and CFHA and everybody who put this together, and for I don't know if y'all saw the invite, but it was pretty snazzy. It was funny because I got a few emails back and they're like, "Oh, that's so cool that you designed that." I was like, "I actually didn't design it, but it was that cool. I wish I could say I designed that invite with the bearded dragons on it." So super glad that you all are here. And of course, the topic of the hour is social media considerations of a professional. So this is kind of going to be behind the scenes of my kind of thought process and how I utilize social media. And so I'm hoping that there can be a lot of things that we can take away from today. So use the chat box as well. I by no means am an expert in this. I am a millennial, so there's that, and have read some books, as we'll get into, on using social media and whatnot. But I think that this topic probably has just so much to learn, and everybody has a slightly different perspective. So I'm just excited that we're here having this conversation. And as things come up, definitely share them in the chat box. We have a bunch of questions kind of already teed up for today. But we can never have probably enough questions. And the more that you all interact, then hopefully the more you get out of it. So as far as an introduction, I definitely have met a lot of you all and have done a lot of presentations with CFHA. But if you don't know me, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist by trade. I'm a co-principal of Beachy Bauman Consulting, an associate of Mountain View Consulting, where Patty is on the call today. So she's I don't know what you consider yourself, principal or owner of Mountain View Consulting. And then in my day job, I'm a director of behavioral health at Community Health of Central Washington. And in addition to the administrative duties, I also am still in clinic about 40% of the time, working as a behavioral health consultant in a federally qualified health center. I actually was in clinic this morning, but my two other BHCs are covering me because they knew that I had the webinar today. And I'm faculty for a postdoc fellowship, faculty for Central Washington Family Medicine's residency, which is super cool. Do a lot of training for our family medicine physicians. They're going through their final 3 years so they can go and be independent, and have some faculty designations, and then do a lot of consulting, training, speaking with regards to Mountain View Consulting and Beachy Bauman Consulting. So that's just kind of a background myself. And today we're going to be talking about different social media platforms and ones that I specifically use, as well as an approach, again, kind of customized through my lens. But like I said, there's no right way to do this. And then we'll pop into the Q&A. The PCBH SIG folks did a fantastic job of, I guess, eliciting questions and then getting them to me in plenty of time. So I was able to really kind of think those through and be prepared to answer them. So thank you guys for setting that up. All right. So again, part of the perspective of social media, and for a lot of us millennials and folks that have kind of grown up on social media, that it didn't necessarily come with a handbook, so to speak. And there is a lot of different considerations to take into account from your professional life versus your personal life. And then what are you even trying to do with your account? So there's just a lot of questions that were unanswered. And like most people, I just kind of was on Facebook already. And with Mountain View, we had a Facebook page, we got a Twitter page, and it kind of happened organically. And then as we were going through, I was like, well, I should probably, read up on this. And one of the things that's so great out being a trainee is that you actually have more time to read. So I've just started reading as many books as possible. I do Audible and listen to books on the way to work, on the way home to work, at the gym, before I go to bed, when back in the day before COVID, when we travel a lot. And so one of my favorite books is with regards to social media is How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age by Dale Carnegie. Don't get too freaked out about that title. It's a really old, it's like a classic book, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's not some type of weird cultish thing like it kind of says, from the title, like, don't judge a book by its title type of deal. But they basically took this classic and they revamped it for how to interact with people digitally. So social media platforms, email, and other ideas. So I definitely recommend that book. Russell Brunson wrote a book called Expert Secrets, and that kind of talks about honing your niche. Grant Cardone, the 10X rule, his perspective is kind of on the importance of taking action. And as a lot of us may be behaviorists on this call, we kind of believe in that perspective of, okay, take action first and other stuff will follow. Another book by the Dale Carnegie organization is Stand and Deliver, and that really helps with public speaking. I absolutely would recommend that book, especially if you're going to be doing YouTube clips or anything where you're going to be speaking. And then High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard, The Compound Effect. So what I would do from, if I could go back and give myself advice, is I would say to start reading sooner, and that we don't, if there's something that you're not sure of, there's a book on it. And then the more you read, then the more you get exposed to other topics. And so that's kind of the phase that I'm in right now, is I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about marketing, learn as much as I can about the use of social media. But this would be a really good start if you guys are interested in this. And I am keeping my eye on that chat box in case any other questions come through. If you or yourself are using social media, it's also helpful to follow a lot of people and follow those people who inspire you. Follow on, LinkedIn or Facebook, Twitter, folks that when their posts basically show up in your feed, that it's bringing something to the table, a positive message. Maybe it's a TED Talk that's being posted, something that basically feeds you and is not necessarily in that kind of absent-minded scrolling through, just kind of on autopilot that can sometimes happen with social media. Follow people on your sites that are important to you, that bring good content. And then, of course, learning by experience. So, we just spent the previous slide talking about how important it is to read on topics and educate yourself on the topic. But to a certain extent, there is going to be aspects where you're just going to have to learn by experience, make a post on something that is important to you, which we'll get into kind of well, how do you decide what to post or not? But if there's a message that you have in your brain or in your heart and you post it and it does not quote unquote perform well, meaning it doesn't get a lot of likes or a lot of shares, that's okay. Keep trying. And over time, you'll kind of get a feel for the ones that kind of do better than others, so to speak. And as we'll get into with some of the other questions, we'll get into where we talk about how do you post and why do you post. And I think that will kind of bring a lot of, calmness to some of your guys' minds if it's kind of freaking you out, the thought of oh man, so I put myself out there and the post didn't perform well. All right, so one of the questions that was put together by the PCBH team, SIG team, is one of the things many of us struggle with is recognizing that we have what we have is worth sharing, essentially. So knowledge or tidbits, videos, comments. And the folks were wondering, well, how do they get over the hump to a point where you're able to kind of make yourself vulnerable enough and to share something, even if you don't feel that you're an expert, or maybe you feel like other people know more than you do. Well, the truth of the matter is there's always going to be somebody who knows more than you do. But that's not a reason to not share what you do know. And so if there is one person that hears whatever message you want to share, from my perspective, that's a success. So if you wait, this is like acceptance and commitment therapy for those of you who are fans of that. If you wait until all of your anxiety is low before you start presenting or posting or making a tweet, you'll never do it. So you have to just kind of take solace in the fact that if there's something that's in your heart and in your mind, and you come across it and you think that it would help one person, post it. Because whoever is going to see that, even if there's 1,000 more people who know more than you do, well, that's okay. Everybody's got to be contributing out there. It's not, if we just waited for only experts to talk on stuff, there wouldn't be enough information to go around. So The book Expert Secrets by Brunson that we had in the previous slide, he talks a lot about that don't wait till you know everything before you start sharing. And if it's important in your mind, there's got to be somebody else who maybe thought that it was important. And the last thing I'll say about this part is, okay, so say you're a true expert in something and you're presenting on it, or you're posting on it, tweeting on it. It is possible that maybe your audience is full ranging, you know, from a beginner to somebody who's an expert, but maybe your information is so high level that if you're a brand new person, it could be overwhelming. So if you're in kind of like a middle stage of your career, in a middle stage where you have something to offer, there could be a beginner or somebody else who's in the middle stage that may be able to connect more to what you're saying than if it was an expert. So I don't know, any thoughts on that or questions or anything else that you guys were interested in, you know, talking about? Because I thought that was a super good question. That's why I put it as the first one.
Hi, Bridget. I was going to type this, but I'll just say it since we're small enough here. I love the developmental perspective, right? Like that had never occurred to me, that me being perhaps in the middle of my developmental experience as a BHC is actually going to be more connective. I think that we often tend, you know, because of who we are as people, like we often tend to doubt ourselves and to doubt all of this, but this is such a great point that where we are now could be the exact, and the way that we message it might be the exact way and method to connect to more people. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the reach. We were talking about that earlier today. Like, how do we get our reach to be at its optimal possible level? And that's such a brilliant point. So thank you for that. That's my take home from this question.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's exciting. And especially for new BHCs, if you're brand new to the role, then you can actually use it as gaining information. And as Dale Carnegie's book talks about, how to win friends and influence folks, that if you pose a lot of questions, that sometimes could be more useful than you only sharing information. And so you can actually get a conversation going by posting something and saying, hey, tell me your favorite part about the PCBH role that you have, or what have you learned from working with patients, or how do you handle working with 10 to 12 patients a day? So if you're a new BHC and you post that and people then see that and they respond, well, you're going to learn something from that process. So I guess you can post even if you don't even have anything necessarily to share, and it might even get more interaction doing it that way. So yeah, definitely good things to think about. Thank you for your comment, Clarissa.
Sure.
Okay. This one is a good question as well. They're all good questions. Posting online could be scary in today's world. True statement. Do you worry about how your content will be received? Any do's and don'ts? What do you need to ask yourself or think about before making a post? And how do you manage negative feedback or a mess up? Yeah, so for those of you who know me, for the first question, you probably already know the answer. Do you worry about how your content will be received? That is absolutely yes. Like most of us, some high functioning anxiety has gotten us where we are. So yes, I absolutely do worry all the time about how it will be received, especially on videos. And the longer something is, or the more it's organic, the more opportunity there is to have something that's not controlled. So if you make a tweet and it's just a statement or a question, you have a ton of control over that, right? You can edit it 17 times if you want before you post it. You could think about it from every angle. But if you have, like, this is being recorded and probably, will be shared widely. That's the thing that I guess makes me the most nervous, is because, I don't know, you might not say something in the right way, or you didn't communicate how exactly you wanted to have it communicate. So then you can ruminate over it. All those things happen. So yes, to answer that question, just like an act as well, we don't not do something though, just because we're worried about it. So my overriding value of getting the word about PCBH out there, talking about these important topics, essentially overrides any of the discomfort. So the discomfort is still there. Maybe overrides isn't the right word. I roll with it. and say, I'm going to have discomfort every single time I post something. I'm probably going to get in my head about it. And at the same time, this information is important. So that's my value, and I'm going to act upon that one. As far as do's and don'ts, I really try to have as many messages as humanly possible that are positive. So that's kind of the lens that I'm looking through, that if I'm going to put something out there, then I want to, and say I want to promote one thing over another thing. I kind of try to stick with promoting this thing instead of putting this other thing down. So just kind of really keeping a high level of positivity at all times. If there's something that I believe in, or I've seen to work, or research has shown to work, sticking with that versus saying, okay, well, this thing is better than this other thing. I just think that that is a good rule of thumb to live by, just in general. Let the work speak for itself versus tearing something else down. Other don'ts. The longer it is, I've found, if you have like a really long post, nobody will read it. Patience, that's fine. Participants will react better a lot of times to photos. So if you have a clear, short message in a photo, that seems to get a lot more engagements than something that's long and drawn out. Even when you go to make your posts, sometimes it does the little ellipses. So in order to see more of it, you have to click on that. I try to avoid that at all possible, because the more difficult it is for somebody on the other side to receive your message, like you have to click something, the less likely it is that they'll click on it. So try to make concise, pithy comments and have that be what you're going to post is super important. Sometimes if you attach like a website or a video, it automatically makes you go into that like second zone. Such as life. But if I can at all help it, try to have it just so that the participant doesn't have to do any more work on their side. As far as how do you manage negative feedback or a mess up, knock on wood, I haven't had a situation. Oh my God, now that I'm saying this, I'm like asking the gods right now, tempting them. I haven't had a situation where I was completely like, oh my goodness, I messed up. This is like a huge failure. There's been times definitely where you wish you would have said something better. There's times where you wish you wouldn't have posted something in a certain way. I know that on one of our videos, there was, so we did a video, Patty was actually on it, and we had cameras on two sides that were set up, and one of the cameras kind of malfunctioned. So we posted this other view. It wasn't the greatest view, but it had really, really good content. But people got confused by that. And they were like, we got a few negative comments on that because they didn't realize that it was just from a different angle. So they thought that like we were conducting a BHC visit, not talking to the patient, but really the patient was just cut out of the room. And I don't really feel like that's a situation that I regret. We didn't take it down. We have it posted. It's got a lot of views on it. I'm proud of the work because the content was so good. But that's just definitely something to think about when you're videoing. Make sure that, you have it from the angle that you want. And because somebody could be confused, like, why are you posting this? Especially if they don't watch it. And there's a lot of first impressions. So yeah, I guess that would be just kind of something to think about. I don't know if anybody on this call has had a situation where they kind of had a mess up and how they handled it. I think I'd be interested to hear that from anybody. It's okay if you didn't have a major mess up. And I know on Twitter, you can't delete them. Like they're on there like you can delete it, but it's still searchable. Neftali, I see your head shaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have a true mess up. In the online world is pretty forgiving on one level of things like video mess ups or even typos and things. It's a lot more forgiving than some of us, most of us who've been trained in academia. We're probably a little more hyper vigilant about those sorts of things. But actually, the online world treasures authenticity and spontaneity, as opposed to like completely planful stuff. And there's variety, right? So like there are some YouTube videos you'll see are very, very, edited, scoped out really perfectly. But those don't necessarily have to be those aren't necessarily the most popular videos that look like a TV production. A lot of the more popular videos are just like random people talking into the camera about stuff that people find interesting and authentic and off the cuff. So just kind of, I think it just depends on your style, and what expectations you set for the audience related to what a mess up is. I mean, if you're NBC posting something on YouTube, then your standard is way up here for stuff, and you got to do a lot of editing and post editing work. But like for my YouTube stuff, it's all way down here. It's like it's one take. That's all you're gonna get.
Right. And Dave helps me a lot with that. With he's my partner in crime, and we do a lot of our videos together. And he's always like, I'm like, cut that part out and edit that out. He's like, show people the full thing, the authenticity. I was like, but do they need to see all of that? Probably not. So there's probably a happy medium somewhere. And you never really get the same authenticity when you redo something. We've redone a few PCBH corners, and honestly, normally the first one is the best. So unless you say something that's like, I don't know, super offensive, but then the question is, why are you saying something super offensive? Outside of that, you should probably use the first take. I like that, Neftali. That's good. Okay, are you allowed to be a full person?
I've got a quick question.
Oh,
sorry.
Yes.
So, Bridget, I'm actually watching, I'm almost done watching the webinar series that you sent me. And I know a couple times you and Dave talk about, I might make some people upset with this comment, or this is kind of like radical, or other things that might not be perceived well, and you just name it. I'm wondering if you've ever kind of got a confirmation from anyone like, whoa, this is so left field, and if you, how you dealt with that, or those types of things.
Yeah, and Brittany, that's a really good question. I think the different venue matters. So like on the webinars that we did, yeah, there definitely was some feedback that you get back channel. That was like, yeah, but that didn't really make sense to me, or I wasn't sure what you were talking about. So actually it was less like, oh, this is offensive somehow, or like wrong. It was less of that and just more kind of like, can you clarify, or I was confused. So that's easier. I think that we had a few comments just on our YouTube channel, essentially, of people kind of saying like, just kind of offensive statements like, this wouldn't help anybody, I'm a patient. And one of the people wrote on there like how they're a patient, and if this is the care that they receive, they'd be super upset about it. So that kind of didn't feel great. But then again, if you have, like in that case, that video has like 3,500 views. If you have 3,500 views and one person takes exception to it or doesn't get what you're trying to do, I don't know, you when you put something out there, psychologically you prepare that not everyone's going to like it, and that's okay. And if they give you that feedback from time to time, which actually, Brittany, it hasn't been that much. So maybe it's more in our own heads than anything. But when we have gotten a little bit of that feedback, it's such a small amount, and there's such an overwhelming response the other way of like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for posting this, or this really helped me. I'm brand new in my role. I was hired 2 weeks ago and I didn't get any training, and watching your video really helped. That again, it's that willingness piece that, yeah, even if there's some negativity that shows up, it's kind of like it's worth it for the mission that you have going on. Okay, cool. Good question, Brittany. Oh. All right, so how often do you post, and is it for the intent of gaining followers or just dissemination of information? Does it matter how many followers you have? And is blogging worth the time investment? What is the most efficient and effective way of having a social media presence? So as far as how often you post, I think that it actually leads right into the section 1A question of, is it the intent of gaining followers or just dissemination of information? Again, this is just my own take on it. I post things based upon what's important to me. And I almost have to treat it as though there's nobody else out there to a certain extent. I mean, I guess that's contradictory because I said, hey, if it helps one person, but if it's good information and it passes my test on my brain, my values, my heart, and it's kind of a message that I want to get out there of some sort, I put it out. And if nobody watches it, nobody sees it, that's okay. And heck, if I'm bored and scrolling through, I could say, look at my own thing and say like, oh, 6 months ago, I said this. At the very least, it captured what I was experiencing at the moment, that I thought that was important at that moment. And so that's kind of, again, my litmus test of like, hey, what do I put out or not put out? I do it all for if it feels right for my being. There are times where we've asked folks to share different topics and say like, hey, is there a topic that you would want me to do a PCBH corner on, or do a post or a video or something? And in those cases, it's a little bit of both. I won't do the topic unless it means a lot to me. But the idea of it came from somebody else, and then we post it. And if they watch it, then that's kind of like a bonus. Because again, if somebody asks you to do something and then you do it, then I'm assuming that they're going to watch it. And so that kind of makes you feel, I'm not going to lie, it makes you feel good. But once again, I wouldn't put it out just for that sake if I didn't feel 100% in my being behind that message. And then as far as getting followers, yeah, I try to get followers, but again, it's not the main message. And I feel like when we put out good work and you put out a good message, the followers will come. Like on YouTube, I think that we're approaching like 700. And last year, I think it was right about 400. So we keep an eye on it. Whereas on, I think Twitter, I have like 80, it's something like completely negligible of the amount of followers. And that's, again, I don't really focus highly on that, but by having, like I said, the previous slide, like putting content that is quick, easy, makes it as easy on the person who's following you to access it as possible. I do take that into account, but as far as the content of it, I only put out what's important to me. And I would say the same thing with this blogging situation, that if it's something that is meaningful to you to put blogs out, I would do it. But if you're going to do it for followers, I probably wouldn't, because you don't even know if it's going to be worth your time. But capturing in that moment what you were experiencing and expressing yourself, I think in and of itself is a worthy activity to do. And it's a bonus if somebody reads it. I do think it is important to post often, because if you don't post often, then people will think if they go to visit your site, if it's, say it's a website, or your LinkedIn or your YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and you don't, put anything out there, then essentially they're going to not come back every time. So having new information is critical. I don't know if I accidentally I did leave out of a slide. See, these things happen. It's organic. For some reason, my finger must have held down too quickly, and I skipped over the social media platform that I have and what I do. So I'm going to go back to that just really quick. These are the social media platforms that I use: LinkedIn, Twitter. I have a website, Facebook, and YouTube. And then you have to always remember that when you are posting, to think about your audience. So CHCW, which is basically my day job, has a YouTube channel that, it's not just me though, it's the whole organization. So if there's a message that I want to get out, I have to ask myself, is this more of a Beachy Bauman thing? Is this more of a Mountain View Consulting? Is this more of a, CHCW venture? And then for the YouTube channel, it's actually technically under Dave, but it's in conjunction with CFHA, Mountain View Consulting, myself, but you have to search basically David Bauman PsyD to find it. So it doesn't have like my name on it, but behind the scenes doing a lot on that YouTube channel. And then with Facebook, once again, I have to kind of get my mind right of like, okay, is this personal? Is this Mountain View? Is this Beachy Bauman? Same thing with Twitter, and same thing with LinkedIn and with the website. So these are the platforms that I use. There was a question about Instagram and like, how do you keep a professional life and a professional life on Instagram? I don't know. It's probably possible. There's ads that come up on my Instagram, but I only have that as a personal account. Sorry about that. That would have provided a little bit more context as to what I was talking about. Okay, so this ties into, are you allowed to be a full person on social media? And can one endorse or push professional interests and also post about family and children? Where's the line? How do you maintain a professional presence on a platform like Instagram? So like I said, I don't do Instagram from a professional standpoint, but it seems like there's a lot of companies and organizations who have figured that out. So maybe follow them and see what how they address it. I don't know. Again, this is my opinion. I don't really think you can be a full person on social media. It's definitely going to be a filtered version of yourself. And it's actually probably the same way on my personal account. I do still try to be, like Naftali was saying, as authentic as possible. So I don't want to filter so much that I'm not recognizable or that it feels fake. But if I had a bad day, I'm probably not going to post that. Or if I had a difficult encounter with, I don't know, a physician I work with, probably not going to go on any of my social media platforms, let alone my professional one, and say like, oh, really had an awkward situation with one of the physicians I work with today. Like, I'm just not going to do that. Whereas, so I don't think in that respect of being a full person, but as in a respect of, for again, those who know me know I have a bearded dragon. I don't know how long it took us to have him mentioned other than the very beginning. So 11:31 or 2:31, whatever time zone you're in, I'll post pictures on my professional account from time to time of my bearded dragon or of my family. Anybody who's done any presentations with Dave or I know that Dave likes to plaster our webinars or presentations with pictures of our family. He says it's his way of bringing the values with him, which I think is super cool. And I'm obviously in agreement with it, or I wouldn't have it on there. So I think that in those ways you can be a full person. I think it's important to share to a certain extent a little bit about who you are. Again, that's just my personal professional opinion, that people connect with folks even on professional topics more when you are genuine and it's not just completely clinical. But once again, everyone's going to have their own comfort level. I know folks that have maybe a more liberal comfort level where they might post about them going to counseling, or they might post about an argument they had, or I don't know, just any situation that could come up because they feel that if they could be more transparent, that would help them connect with more people. I completely respect that. And I know that there's some people who are more on the conservative side where you would never find a picture of a pet. You would never find a picture of their spouse or their kids or whoever else. I think it's their own comfort level. I try to find somewhere in the middle where I get to share myself with somebody else and still kind of keep a piece for my own life, and only share as much as I feel is necessary in an intentional manner, kind of like how we do with self-disclosure as a clinician. So I'm not sure exactly where the line is. I don't know if anybody else has any good thoughts on that again, they want to put into the chat box. Okay, I have a tortoise and a box turtle. Awesome. Love reptiles of all kinds. Important to think about future employers seeing your posts. Absolutely. Yeah. Or, future employers, or if you're doing contract work and they go and they look you up and you have certain things, yeah, that can get in the way. When having a personal and professional account, do you try and make your personal account hard to find to continue to keep those accounts separate? Yeah, I have just a different name for my personal account on Facebook so that you're not as easily searchable. LinkedIn, I have my own name, which hopefully, it's LinkedIn. It's supposed to be a little bit more professional. I actually do have a Twitter account, but I don't use it very often. I mostly only use Twitter for a professional account. I think that is a good idea to change your name on it. It's not like now a license to just post all kinds of stuff. Probably wouldn't want to do that, as most things are searchable to a certain extent. But I think that can help provide a little bit more protection for being a slightly more full person in your personal versus professional life. Okay. So those were the main questions that I had gone through and was prepared to talk on. I think we have plenty of time, shockingly. This is like first presentation I've had ample time to talk about at the end. Yeah, so other topics that you guys want to discuss, other questions, lingering things in your back of your mind, I think now would be a great time to talk about them.
I'm curious about, the different audiences for the different platforms. It's something we've thought about here at CFHA because we would actually love to get more people on Twitter, but Twitter in our audience, there doesn't seem to be as big of an overlap there with Twitter as opposed to Facebook, which probably just tells us that our audience is a little bit on the older side in general, because at least what my kids tell me is that, Facebook is for old people. Twitter is for I don't know, old people nerds of some sort, of a certain category, maybe politics or other things like that. But it doesn't seem to resonate super big for our crowd for whatever reason. And, the up and coming generations will do a lot of YouTube. And now it's a lot of TikTok. And Snapchat, which is sort of maybe waning away. So anyway, so there's lots of different audiences. And so just what are your comments about thinking about that phenomenon, that there's different audiences for different platforms, and then how you maybe think about tailoring your material for the different audiences?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, Naftali. Of course, if anybody has some type of insight or something that they utilize, you can utilize the chat box for that. So I have found that Twitter does not get a lot of love from what I posting things. And there are some people who are very active on Twitter, and it kind of seems like it's a lot of the same names showing up. But I will say that just utilizing it more and using it more, you can kind of get connected with like-minded people. And so it can be kind of a rich experience. And like I was saying earlier, posting more for your own development versus for an audience can be helpful. So I still find Twitter to be helpful, even if other people aren't utilizing it as much. And Facebook tends to get a little bit more engagement, and there's opportunities to, I don't know, Facebook is easy. There's a lot of different options that you can post. You can post a video directly to it. You can, of course, link together your YouTube video to it. You could just make a comment. You can make a photo. I know you can do that a little bit on Twitter, but it just seems a little bit easier on Facebook. And so if I do something on LinkedIn, I think about it. I really imagine like everybody being in a work state of mind. So I try to have it be informative. I try to have it be something related to professional development. Same thing with Twitter, even though there's not as much engagement. With Facebook, I tend to be a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, more likely to share pet pictures or family pictures or something more fun. I try to keep that off of LinkedIn as much as possible and try to keep a little bit more like on the spectrum of fun and personal to professional. My LinkedIn is definitely far over here. And then like Instagram is largely like pictures. I don't see why you couldn't post a lot of pictures and have like one caption to have something important to say on that. And then YouTube is definitely utilized. It seems like, Naftali, like we were saying, all ages. We get a lot of feedback from people who are in their early 20s all the way, up, and they find it to be useful at developmental stages. So YouTube to me is like the giant, is like the most important one. If I could put good content on YouTube, then it's kind of like I feel harmonious in what I'm trying to do. Facebook is fun. It's easy. Twitter is fun and easy. And then LinkedIn is really going to be for that professional lens. But there are people write books on all this stuff. I'm sure there's a book that outlines all this. Now it probably would have to be updated like every 6 months to keep up with the times. I did think about like, man, do we need to get a PCBH TikTok going? I don't know. And that's the thing, like I'm by no means, my goodness, I'm an expert, but it doesn't mean that I don't have something to say on the topic or on something to facilitate if I can take my own advice from the very beginning. of this presentation. So I would reach out to folks that have a really big following, and just say, hey, what have you done? I guarantee they'll respond to you. If they're using social media platforms, then probably part of what's giving them the success is how responsive they are. So yeah, keep your eye out. And it doesn't even have to be somebody from our own field. It could be a different professional who's trying to build a presence on social media. Ask them what they did. You probably take away some important nuggets. How do you choose who and when to respond to on comments? That's a good question. A lot of people will email, so they won't just comment directly on whatever gets sent out. So they'll email directly. I try to email, if somebody emails me, I try to email them back. And I try to not do it where it's like, 3 times a day or something, but maybe once a week. I'll sit down with my Gmail and answer questions that people will email me. As far as Facebook, or I guess Facebook comes the most comments. I'm quicker on Facebook just because I think it's just easier. Twitter's pretty easy to respond. If somebody says something negative or hurtful, and it's not constructive feedback, I guess it would be different if somebody messaged you and said like, hey, are you aware how this thing came off? That would be a situation that I would engage in. But if somebody was like, that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen, or that wasn't helpful, or if this is the type of work that you do, then you're hurting a lot of patients, I don't engage at all. I don't respond. You can delete it. I try to delete it if it's that bad. But like I said, I haven't had that much. I'm like testing the gods right now. I haven't had much of that, thank God. And then I do try to interact with so for example, we have a video and we post it, we post it on all sites, right? And somebody on Facebook comments and says, oh, well, I found this to be super helpful. What do you think about that? Anything that involves keeping the discussion going, where there's more opportunities for people to learn, or opportunities for maybe somebody who's reading that thread to learn, I try to engage in that as much as possible too. Because then it's kind of like you can see the whole conversation, and it could be a good learning experience for not only yourself, but somebody else who's reading it. And then of course, engaging with somebody that would give them the positive reinforcement, we're all behaviorists here, to come back to your page and to interact with you more. And again, the more your audience can interact with you, the more you're going to learn, and the more it can kind of tailor your content. And like I said, you still want the final call for what you do to be in your own value system, but they can spark an idea. And it's a win-win if the idea feels good to you and the idea is something that somebody else wanted you to do, then it's kind of a win-win situation, and they kind of feel like close to you in that way. Like, oh, hey, like if I reach out to Bridget on Facebook about this topic regarding PCBH or integrated care, she cares enough to respond, like that's cool. And that just helps their engagement level. Other thoughts, questions? These are really good questions, by the way.
I think there was one more comment that we have gotten to about whether or not you should respond to all comments, which I think you touched on a little bit.
Yeah, for the most part, like I said, I designate like one time a week on Gmail to answer emails, and then social media. If I see something come up in the week and I'm busy, I try to, just for me personally, I try to limit my social media to, I think 3 times a day. And same thing with email, actually. That's been a new venture for me. Got it from one of the books that I read. And so that you're not wasting time. So I try in the morning, I will check I'll try to do my most important thing that I got to do in the morning. Like if there's a presentation I got to put together, I want my best mental capacity to go towards that. Or if there's a project for my day job that I need to do, I try to do that first. And then I allow myself like 5 to 10 minutes to check my work email, check Gmail, and basically Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And I won't check it again until lunch, and I won't check it again until I'm home, I've left work and I'm at the gym. And if I'm working out on like the bike or something where I'm sitting down, I'll read through it. Sometimes I'll do it when I'm walking or jogging as well. So I try to not do it more than that. So it's either 3 times a day or less. There could be some days that I don't start off the morning, it might just be only at the gym, just to be more intentional, because the online world, you can lose a lot of time, as we all probably know. And there's a lot of mindlessness that goes into it. So if I'm going to utilize social media as a platform to disseminate information, and if I'm going to use social media as a consumer to learn more, it needs to be in this really intentional fashion. And then if I get sparked with an idea of something I want to post, I'll just write it down on my to-do list or on my sticky note. I have sticky notes all over my computer. They're like the, not physical sticky notes, but on the sticky notes that come in your computer that you can have in your desktop. So I have one that's actually just for ideas, so that throughout the day, as ideas pop into my mind, I just put it onto the sticky for different PCBH corners, different topics, different webinars, different presentations. I have a whole sticky note for conference presentation ideas that come, and I just write them down when I can. And that kind of, again, helps with going down the rabbit hole of like just being in this social media world, and you just lose hours. Like, we want to use this to be productive, not to lose ourselves in it. I don't know if anybody else has any helpful tips to help them from going into the rabbit hole themselves as both a producer and or as a consumer. Vincent, that's a good question. You could put that into the chat box if you have something important or something that you do that works for you. But how do you handle politics creeping in? Yeah, I don't do a lot on politics anymore. Memories on Facebook that come up. Oh God, that's like worse than reading your middle school diary. It's bad. It is. It is so bad. Actually, that can give you information about what not to post, do's and don'ts that we talked about in the beginning of this webinar. If you go back and you posted something and it's just so cringeworthy, you're like, oh God, why did I do that? So I think it was when Obama was running, I got super apparently into politics. Who knows? But there's a lot of posts that are coming from that range. And just, I think that falls into that professional versus personal. Now, again, everybody has their own line. So I'm not saying that if you talked about politics, that's wrong or that's bad. Just for me, I try to stay as far away from it as humanly possible. If there's something, I think I posted a video, actually, that Brittany, you sent me, about being all in for like that inclusivity. I posted that all over my social media. I didn't see that as political. I saw that as humanitarian. And so with the Black Lives Matter, I know that some people look at that as politics. I look at it as a humanitarian thing. So in my brain, it went more that way versus politics. So that's why I was okay posting on, situations like that. Probably if there was like an LGBTQ item that was up politically about like voting rights, or not voting, like folks that to be able to get married and having that parity, I would probably be okay with posting stuff like that, because again, in my brain, I don't see that as political. I see that as humanitarian. So definitely for those of you out there, just get it right in your own mind of like where your line crosses. And then you can always go back to your own self and say, okay, well, here's the boundaries that I've created for myself. Where am I at with it? And then over time, of course, you might have to switch that up. I mean, it's 2020 right now. In 2025, I might be looking back at the presentations that are posted all over the internet and some of the videos I've done and just comments and posts, and just be like, my goodness, what was I thinking? So try to stay away from any non-humanitarian politics. Have some situations with people commenting on this and that. Yeah, I delete them, just straight up delete them from my posts and say like, this isn't really the purpose of this. We're all trying to learn something here. This isn't productive. This is negative and taken away. I actually, shockingly, now that I say all these things, it's going to happen. But I have not had that many people post political stuff on my stuff yet.
Yeah, you just jinxed yourself. Don't even try.
And that's why I jinxed myself from the beginning of this webinar. I've said so many things like, oh, I haven't had very many negative feedback situations or things of big mess ups.
Yeah, I would just add, I think this has been great, Bridget. I would just add that I think what I've seen to be more effective with uh, streams is really sticking to, sticking to like a niche, right? So like, um, when I was doing my YouTube videos on YouTube, um, it was all just like skill-based stuff related to being a BHC. And so I didn't really bleed any other things into that, whether it was my personal opinions about, food, or I didn't start commenting on the politics of the day. It was just like, nope, that's what it is, because that's what social media channels are and how people use them. They go to them for a particular purpose. And so it gets confusing for the audience actually when you bring in, when you mix a YouTube account, unless it's a personality based stream, right? So if it's like Kim Kardashian, she can probably mix in selling her clothes and some drama with her family, and some food, a picture of the food she ate for lunch that day, right? But that's because it's centered on the personality. For most of us, we don't have that star power, so it's going to be focused on like a particular angle we're taking on something, and then our audience expects that from us, and it's better usually not to then mix it all up,
Right.
put a bunch of other stuff in there other than your own like personal feed. If your personal feed, you can do whatever like you want on it, but for stuff where you're trying to kind of influence others on some level, whether it's with education or a professional thing, you kind of want to develop your own angle.
So I think that's a super good point. And as a professional developmentally, as I've gone into different areas such as, leadership and organization systems levels, in addition to just doing more of the BHC role, I've had a little bit more of a wider range, but still you want to, like Naftali's saying, you want to stay within the range of like what your everyday career is like and what you're talking about. So yeah, leadership is a big part of my role now, whereas 5 years ago it wasn't. So now if I'm going to talk about that, hey, we're okay, because it's still within the range. But yeah, if I start putting out something like you said about like a restaurant review, it would be confusing. It's like, wait, I thought Bridget paired with all these different, with their Mountain View and with CFHA to talk about integrated care and skills-based and all this, like why are you talking about this? One of the other things I think is kind of an untapped that we haven't talked about, I'm looking at the time here, it's 52 after the hour, so we got a couple minutes, is the crossover. So with websites, you can do a lot of this stuff. So on your website, so like if you go to Mountain Views or you go to Beachy Bauman's, there's a lot of Patty's done a great job of having a lot of content just in general on integrated care at Mountain View, and she has way before I ever started working with her. And there's like, a lot of links to this topic and links to these worksheets and links to these videos. And so then it links up with YouTube. And then for my website, Beachy Bauman consulting website, we have this thing where you can click on it and it will take you right to PCBH Corners. And then there's another page that has like a partner section, and we might have CFH on it. We have CFHA on there, I think. So there's like this partner section, and if you go to that section and then you click, and we have a Mountain View on there, we have Kent Corso's his company on there. If you go and you click on it, then it will take it right to their website. So there can be a lot of interconnectivity and overlap. So if you have a YouTube video, if you have a video and you put it on YouTube, then you can put it on your website. You could put it on Facebook. You could put it on LinkedIn, Twitter, and to have that, to increase the chances and that dissemination that as many people will be able to see it as possible, especially again, if you have an important message to share. And so using your website, if you wanted to do a blog, it could be like, hey, follow this link, and it takes you right to the blog. And then underneath the blog, there could be a video. So you can use a lot of networking, dare we say, social networking, to get just some momentum going. So you might, CFHA does a really good job of that. There's like 17 different places on your website that you can click to go to YouTube, or that you can go, for this section to this section. and you can, get back there. So I think that utilizing the interconnectivity between websites, between YouTube and all these social media sites and blog forums can be super important. Okay. I do appreciate, again, that you guys had just such good questions. And, I'll be transparent and genuine at this moment that, even doing this webinar, I thought to myself, like when I think Brittany, you asked me to do it, I kind of thought to myself, well, I'm not really an expert in this. Yeah, I've read some books, and yeah, as we've gone over, we have some platforms that I utilize. And yes, I'm a millennial, but I'm sure there's people who know a lot more about this stuff, and that all those kind of thoughts ran through my mind. And I'm sure after this presentation is done, I'm going to leave and be like, oh, I hope that I spoke well on it. I hope that I didn't say anything that turned somebody off. But that's just part of this. And at a certain point, I was like, no, there's some really cool stuff that could be done with social media. And maybe somebody will log on in this webinar and find something that's useful. And so it's worth all that discomfort that can come up. So again, back to that first question that y'all had, that even if somebody looks confident, sometimes I'll get that like, oh, well, in your videos, you look confident. It's like, well, you didn't crack what's open in the mind. This is just a lot of practice. I actually had somebody ask me that yesterday, like, do you get nervous for presentations? And I was like, well, not really anymore, but yeah, for probably about 10 years, I would get so sick. I couldn't even speak in front of somebody else, from about, I don't know, probably like 14 to 24. I couldn't even, like, the thought of public speaking, I would just like become physically ill. So I just appreciate you guys taking the time. And even if I don't know a lot on the topic, if you could take one nugget away, then this is, I think, a useful venture. All right. Well, we have 3 more minutes. Any final comments, thoughts, questions? All right. Looks like I love behavioral health people. They're so great. Behavioral health consultants. Because, yeah, you're never going to leave a visit without a summary. So we ain't leaving a webinar without a summary. Tidbit number 1, I like that. Embrace where you are in your development. Tidbit 2, sometimes creating a forum or mechanism for connection is more important than the content. Tidbit 3, foster positivity and building up rather than the focus on criticism and tearing down. Those are my tidbits. Clarissa, thank you so much. That's super helpful and orienting.
No worries. Thank you so much, Bridget. I can't thank you enough for doing this and for fighting through some of that, ambivalence and things that come up for us. We really appreciate it. I had to, and I'm sorry, I was here for the beginning. I had to jump out to go do a consult, as it goes. So those were the tidbits from the pieces that I took, but I know that this was very rich and very helpful in this day and age. So thank you so much for your time. I wanted just to remind everyone that PCBH is doing elections right now. So please submit your nominations for co-chair or co-secretary or student representative if you're interested. Thank you, Bridget Beachy, for your expertise, what I would call expertise in this area. I don't know, is there any other last comments?
I think the last thing I emphasized about that reading aspect, I literally can't recommend that more. I actually have
reading.
Yeah, do audiobooks, everything and anything. And then as you start reading more, they'll pop up, they'll say, oh, you like this book, what do you think about this one? And well, that's kind of scary. Big Brother knows, but they do a good job. They're picking topics that are super important. So I can't stress that enough. I think I got away from some of that during graduate school just because of, you're in training. So all of your time gets put that way, but you don't want to stop your personal development in this process. And it's not like graduate school is going to prepare you for all the things that are going to come up in your career. So I'm going to be nice to my previous self, but message to previous self would have been to start reading more often, sooner.
Thanks so much. Very, very interesting. It's well thought out. I mean, I think it is. The hardest part is just to dive in. I've been on the diving board for a while here, you know, thinking about all the possibilities. Thanks for the encouragement. Have a great day. Yes.
Yeah. Patty's like the OG of websites posting. She has her you've had your content, Patty, on there for a long time. So I think you kind of blaze the trail, even if it feels scary on that diving board.
Lots of new stuff though. It's like ongoing. You're just always, you know, you're never arriving. Yeah.
Gives us all hope and a little bit of scary thoughts. We'll never arrive, but that's a good thing, right? It's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much.
Be well. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you.